Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you an update on how the plants are doing here in the vegetable garden, and I'll also be planting up a little bit more of the vegetable garden. So the last few days have been really good actually. It's now the 9th of May and the temperatures have really increased and everything's looking quite lush now and growing well. Now yesterday was even 21 degrees, which is exceptionally warm for this time of year because normally the midsummer average maximum should be about 18 degrees. So it was actually warmer than a midsummer's day on average. So we had some really nice weather yesterday. Today's a bit different, cold and cloudy, but it can be quite changeable up here in North Scotland. But it looks like going forward, although we're going to have another cold, cloudy week, the week after that might be good again. So the growth has been good in the last week or so. It's going to be a bit slow for the next week, but I would expect everything to really start growing quite lushly now that we're into May. So I'll give you a quick tour of the vegetable plot, and then I'm going to be starting to plant up some of the remaining beds. So the problem we've had this year is we've been a bit late in getting things ready. Ideally I would have had all the brassicas planted by now. The brassicas can go out in March, April time because they can handle some colder temperatures. So normally this would be fully planted and the brassica plot would be finished with a cage around it. This year we've been really a bit late with that. So I've planted up all the kohlrabi. The kohlrabi, they grow and harvest really quickly, so we don't normally have too many issues with pests with them. So I don't mind them being out in the open. If there's pigeons or cabbage butterfly, it's not a massive issue. I can see something has eaten it here, probably a pigeon, but normally these aren't hit as badly because they grow so quick and harvest so fast. They tend to harvest before the pests get bad. So I put these out even though they're out in the open, but what I need to do is plant up the rest of the brassicas to make sure we get the most of the season. So what I'll be doing is finishing off this plot. Normally what I would do is I would dig in some nutrients to this plot as a slow release organic feed, and also the wood ash. You can see my dad's already prepared this section here. And what he's been doing, this is slightly differently this year. Normally what we do is we mulch the seaweed on the top, but my dad wanted to try and encourage the roots to go a bit deeper. So this whole section from here right to the edge he's already done, and he basically puts in lots of seaweed and lots of cardboard. The cardboard adds to the organic matter, it really helps keep the moisture in, and the seaweed just acts as a feed, it breaks down and it's a growth stimulant and helps the plant to grow better. So normally we put the seaweed on the surface as a mulch to keep off the weeds, but this year we're trying to encourage slightly deeper roots, so we put it into the soil. So what I need to do is finish this off, but I don't have time to go and get the seaweed and finish it off as my dad was doing because it's actually very labour intensive. It's not too much of a walk to the sea, but getting all that seaweed will take quite a long time because we need a huge amount. Especially as this doesn't look like a huge amount, but when it's wet it's about 4 or 5 times larger, and when it dries up it shrinks. So there was a lot more seaweed than this originally. It just shrinks down, it doesn't look like a huge amount. So it's actually several sacks of seaweed is actually probably in this trench at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flatten this site. As you can see, my dad has been kind of moving the soil over. I'm going to rake that back into this side where the trench is, weed over this side as well, and then I'm just going to level the whole thing. What tends to happen, because we add so much nutrition to our soil in the form of compost and seaweed, you get bits of stones and dirt mixed in with that, and over time the sites are getting higher and higher. So you can probably see there it's quite a lot higher than the surrounding soil, and we get this kind of mounding effect. You can see it also on this one here, a bit in them and that one, but not as much. So what I need to do is rake this out, reduce that mounding effect, bring some of the soil down to here and make it a bit more manageable. So I'll be doing that, breaking the soil from the left into there. This soil, I'll be loosely digging it over, adding some slow release organic fertilizer, and also adding a lot of ash. The reason we put wood ash on is because we have slightly acidic soil and we suffer from clubroot, and any kind of brassica can get affected by clubroot. So the kohlrabi aren't too badly affected because they're very short-lived, but all the other brassicas like kale, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, any of those can get badly affected. So making the soil less acidic really helps with that, and also it adds some nutrition in the form of calcium, potassium and phosphorus. So we use a lot of wood ash. The house my parents live in is mostly heated by wood, so we have pretty much an unlimited supply of wood ash. So we put extra amounts on the brassica pats because they like it a little bit more alkaline, and also it really helps with the clubroot. So I'll just turn around now to the allium patch. So this is the allium patch. Alliums is just basically the family that grows onions, leeks and garlic and all those kind of crops. So this is the first crop of onions that my dad planted. These are looking really good. These were planted at the correct time, or even a little bit late. We often plant them in autumn, and it's mild enough here that they overwinter and they get a really good head start in spring. So these are doing well. I've got a few nice poppies that we've left because they always look nice in the garden. And over here the garlic's coming up nicely, and this is the other set of onions, which are a bit further behind because they were planted a bit late. So what I'll be doing here is in this section here we're going to be planting potatoes. If I have the time I might do that in this video, I'm not sure yet. And then this section here we're going to be putting in leeks and probably some salad crops, but we've still got a few brassicas from last year's crop, so what we'll be doing is leaving these for now. We tend to let the kale go to flower. It's great for the beneficial insects and also for the pollinators, so and it also looks nice as well. So we let a lot of the kale go to flower, and you can see we've got red cabbage here as well that we didn't get around to harvesting, so we've let that go to flower as well. All the other things like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower and cabbages have all been harvested already. And over here we have a purple sprouting broccoli. We've been harvesting this like crazy, but it's just cropping so much. This one we've kind of let go a little bit more to seed and flower. This one though, we've been collecting a lot of the crop, and you can see they're all perfectly ready for collecting. So I'll keep collecting these throughout the next few weeks, and this will keep flowering right into midsummer, but we will need to remove this just to make space for the other crops. And then we also have some of that Japanese mustard here that we kind of use like a salad. So going over, we're doing something slightly different in this patch than we would do normally. This was the old potato patch. Normally we do potatoes every year, but we're trying to make it a bit easier on ourselves, do a bit less digging. So this year we're going to try something else. We're going to do Jerusalem artichokes. You still need to dig them quite a bit, but the idea is we're not going to prepare the plot as much as we prepared it with the potatoes. My dad likes to do double digging, which is really heavy, laborious work, and dig in loads of organic matter. Jerusalem artichokes don't need as much nutrients and feed, so we'll be growing them here, see how they do. We also have a little perennial rocket plant here, which is doing really nice as well. So what we're doing this year to make it really low maintenance is we're just smothering all the weed with cardboard to save us some weeding, and then we just put mulch on top. We cut holes, and the Jerusalem artichokes, which are these little plants down here which look like sunflowers because they are closely related, these will come up. These will be really quite tall. They probably should grow to about 3 or 4 meters in height. In this location it gets quite windy, so I might top them to encourage them to get a bit bushier so they don't get destroyed by the wind. And then what we'll do is underneath them we'll grow pumpkins, so it's like double cropping in this small space, so we should get 2 harvests. There will be a few potatoes that came up because it's always impossible to get every last potato when you're harvesting the potato patch, so we'll probably let them come up, but ideally for crop rotation we should probably take them out, but this year we're just going to let them grow. And then going along, this section isn't done yet, so in this video what I'll be doing is my mum has planted up all this side here. I'm going to be planting up this other side. This bit is potatoes. Unfortunately, we actually had too many potatoes this year. We weren't able to eat them all in time, so they've all started to grow. The rest of the plot was harvested and eaten, but this section we just didn't have time to eat them all, so you can see they're starting to grow because of the warmer weather. So I might actually just let these grow, and we'll just have an extra crop of potatoes there. Because there's so many, we won't get large potatoes, but what we can always do is harvest them early, around about June, July time, get really nice salad potatoes in early summer, and then we could plant that up with some kind of late crop. Ideally not kale, because we would like to keep the crop rotation, but kale would be a perfect candidate. So I might find something else that's quick harvesting, maybe some more dwarf beans, or maybe even a courgette, and that could fill that corner there. But this section here anyway, this will be Jerusalem artichokes again, planted up and mulched, so that'll be something I'll be doing in this video or next video. I'll probably do it once I need to cut the lawn. I need to get some mulch from somewhere to keep the cardboard down and keep it from blowing away. And then going over here, we have the legume patch, or peas and beans basically. This is looking quite good. You can see here the peas are coming along nicely. We got some Japanese mustard put in the middle as well. This section here, my dad's already planted up with parsnips. Parsnips always grow amazing in this climate. There's something about our garden the parsnips just seem to love. I think it's probably the really deep, rich soil that we have. So I'll show you on this side here where my dad's dug a trench already. We have actually got about 2 or 3 foot of topsoil. It's very rich topsoil. It might not look amazing here because it's been baked in the sun, but it's actually really high in organic matter. It's a really lovely, rich soil. We've been adding a lot of nutrition to it over the years, and so we've got this lovely sandy soil with lots of organic matter. It holds a decent amount of water considering it's sandy. But I think because it's such deep topsoil, it's also free draining. We've taken all the rocks out as well. We actually created a huge pile which is now covered in grass, so you can't see it. This was completely flat up to a wall like there, so there's probably maybe a ton or 2 of stones we've taken out of the soil. So we're pretty much stone free, which is really useful for root crops, especially for parsnips that grow so long, because it means the roots don't hit any stones as they're going down and fork or turn into numerous roots, so we just get long giant parsnips. So the soil is really deep, free draining sandy soil, which is what they like, and our climate is quite cool, and parsnips just seem to really like our climate. So we'll get some giant parsnips here, but we always find they take a very long time to germinate, so I don't know how long until these appear. They always appear quite late. We normally sow them around March or April time. Sometimes it takes 1 or 2 months until they come up. Sometimes we have bad batches of seeds, so we have to sow again in June. But even with late sowing, we find that they still come up and produce a good harvest. They have a very long growing season, so we'll be harvesting them over autumn and winter, and they're a really good winter crop. They'll stay in the ground, perfectly hardy, right through to spring, so that's a really good winter crop for us. And we also grow a lot of carrots as well. Carrots do well here. We just have to make sure that we don't get too much carrot root fly. And the idea is the central path, which is here at the moment, we move slightly further left, so hopefully we're doing this video, and then sowing up this section here with carrot seeds. I would like to do that today, but it's quite windy and there's a risk that the seeds could blow everywhere and I won't get the nice rows, so I probably won't do that in this video. That's something I'll be doing soon. And then over here, this is the broad beans that I planted recently. I took the tops off because they were too leggy, but as you can see, they're growing now with nice side shoots. They're still a bit slow, but these should really take off soon, and we'll hopefully get a nice crop of broad beans kind of around July time. Normally we try and overwinter them, get an earlier crop, but this year we'll probably get a summer crop as opposed to an early summer or spring crop. So I go ahead now, I'll start working on this plot here, breaking it level and getting rid of all the weeds. So with this sped up footage, I'm just about to get ready to get the brassica plot ready. So as you can see, there's a section my dad's already done. I'm basically raking that section into the trough that he's made just to make sure it's level and a bit more even, so we don't have a really uneven section. Majority of the work is actually going to be weeding this site. I've sped up this bit extra fast because I did take quite a while with that, but it was basically just lots of weeds that had grown up in the springtime with the warmer weather. Mostly grasses, which are quite difficult to take out because their roots really cling to the soil, so they're a little bit tricky. But I'm just going along now, making sure that the site is fully weeded. You'll also notice how windy it is today. If you look at the trees in the background and also the brassicas on the left hand side of the plot, you can see how much they're blown around the wind. It is quite a windy day, so just a good example of some of the conditions that we have in this garden. So now that I'm finished weeding, I'm just raking across the remaining section of soil, making sure it's nice and level. As I do this, I'm not too worried about trampling on the soil too much because I need to have it compacted anyway for the brassicas, as that's what they prefer. And as I find any stones or any roots from weeds, I'm taking that out as well as I go along. So this next section, you can see I'm marking out for the path. What I'm going to do here is just rake the soil out a little bit so there's a slight depression for the path, and then using some of the old mulch, some of the coarser material, I'm just going to use that as a surface for the path, just to keep any weeds down and protect the soil. And now I'm getting ready to prepare the soil. So what I'm doing, because it's so windy, is I'm mixing a batch of bloodfish and bone and ammonium sulfate for the extra nitrogen in with a little bit of soil and compost, which is slightly damp, so that when I spread it on the soil, it doesn't all blow away with the wind. And also it has a slight color change when I put it down, so it's easier for me to see where it is. Then once I've got a good covering, what I do is I just get the fork just to lightly mix it into the soil, make sure it's distributed evenly so it's not too harsh in one area. And then once it's fully forked over and I'm happy that it's mixed in, I then just give it a nice rake over the surface just to make sure that the surface is even and there's not any big troughs or big peaks. And just to keep you guys updated as to what I'm doing today, I won't be really putting this on the video, I'll just show you very quickly and I'll do it off video. But I'll be planting up these tumbling tom tomatoes in large pots. These are cascading type tomatoes, so they need to be in a pot. They can be on the ground, but they tend to sprawl everywhere, so I'll be planting them up today in pots. I've also got several plants that I need to plant out, so I've got things like the Tuscany chard here, I've got cauliflower from the brassicas, and I've also got some giant cabbage as well. And because we had a bad failure with the initial sowing of some of the brassicas, I've got loads of brassicas here which need to be potted on into the smaller pot stage, so I'll just be pricking these out, putting them into individual pots like this here, and then after a few weeks they'll be going out in the brassica plot once it's a bit larger. So what we have here is we have more cauliflower, because although we have some cauliflower, we don't have enough. We've also got some giant cabbage seeds here, because again we don't have much white cabbage. We also have some red cabbage because that never germinated, and this is also some winter cabbage, because although we have this giant cabbage that doesn't overwinter as well, this one is particularly hardy and does well over the winter time. And I've just spotted we actually have our first strawberry there. You can see just down there, just starting to turn red. I hadn't noticed we had any ripe yet. The rest are all coming along nicely, but they're green. I don't know why that one's ripened faster. It might be because I added a lot of additional feed to that bed for the salad crop that I was growing. Over here the other ones are much further behind, they're all completely green, but I have recently fed these with tomato feed, so they should come on soon. So I'll go ahead now, I'll start planting these up, these little plants, into their new larger pots. So off camera I went ahead and potted up all the brassica plants, but what I did film here is me setting up a cage and a structure for the cucumbers to grow up. So what I'm using here is I'm using the old sticks from the willow that I pruned earlier in the year. These will make a really nice sturdy structure once they're tied together securely. The way I'm doing it is I'm using square lashing, so I'm just using garden twine. I'm doing some square lashing between the horizontals and the verticals, and this will give a really good solid connection between each post and make sure it's really nice and secure. So this is the main framework that I'm doing at the moment. What I'll then add in later is some thinner sections because the spacing is a little bit too high for the cucumbers to climb up. But this is just the main structural sections of the frame, just to give it that support that other smaller sections can then be tied to. So you'll see at this section I start putting in some smaller sticks at the lower section. This is just to help the cucumbers get started, and then I'll put in a few extra sticks just to make sure there's more places for support. But later on, if cucumbers are still struggling to find enough places to climb onto, I'll probably add in some string or more thin sticks for them to climb onto. Now I'll take you over to the next section where I'll be working, which will be this far section. So what I'll be doing here is I'll be taking out the excess weeds. There's a lot of potatoes coming up in this bit, so I'll take out the excess weeds from here. I'll then plant this middle bit up with Jerusalem artichokes. I'll check if there's any, there should be, I've been told there should be some down here that my mum planted. I'll check if any of them are coming up. If not, I might also put a few extra in that side, and I'll see if I can find some more cardboard to lay down the soil. I probably can't do that today because it's too windy and the grass hasn't grown enough for me to mulch it down with, but I'll definitely be planting some Jerusalem artichokes in here. All I need to do is push the grass mulch aside. I'll then get a Stanley knife and I'll just cut across in the cardboard so that the Jerusalem artichoke can push through. I'll plant it just below the surface underground, and then it will grow up through, and we'll have nice young plants like those ones over there coming up, and by the end of summer they will be really quite tall. So one thing I'd like to do with this section as well is put a thin line of tree spinach along there. It does grow very tall, so I want it on the north side so that it doesn't shade anything. Anything that does shade will just be the beds behind, so that's not a problem as most of those things are shrubs. So the tree spinach, I was growing a few from seed, but they've not done too well, and actually the ones that have self-seeded in the garden have done much better. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to harvest the biggest, nicest looking plants from here. The rest of this section I'm just going to hoe it off and try and kill off any of these unwanted tree spinach, because if these grow they'll outcompete the onions and they'll just be far too much. So I'm going to take out the biggest and largest ones. I think there's some slightly nice ones over here. You can see in this old brassica patch here, probably because there was a lot of nitrogen in the ground in this area. We've got some nice stocky plants with big leaves, so I'll be transplanting these over to that side, and that'll be a nice crop of tree spinach for later in the summer. So this is a quick time lapse of me planting up the Jerusalem artichokes. The section on the far left, as I said previously, has been already fully planted up, so I'm just doing the section in the middle and some of that bare earth area as well. The section on the right is where the potatoes are currently, so I'll just be quickly weeding them. Fortunately, they actually smother the weeds once they get started, so it's only the larger perennial weeds that I really need to worry about, and any of the annuals which are getting a bit too large. You can see there's a really large dock plant there on the right hand side which is shaking around in the wind, so that definitely needs to come out. But otherwise, just quick weeding, planting up with Jerusalem artichokes, and then I don't show it in this video, but later on I'll mulch it with grass to stop any other weeds coming through. So that's all for this update. In the next update I'll be planting up the remaining brassica plants and also planting up some potatoes, but the main focus will be on some of the wind damage that we've had in the garden over the winter and early spring. Also a lot of the damage and pests we've had to the plants, such as pigeon damage. Pigeons have been really bad in the brassicas and peas recently. We've also had some weevils nibbling our beans, and we've also got rust on some of the beans. So it's just looking a bit more of the focus on some of the issues that we've had recently.